Chicks Talking Shift, and this conversation is a little different than the ones we've had in the past because we have brought in the spiritual masters and wisdom teachers, the greatest of our day, even the ascended ones.
Even the ascended ones. That's absolutely.
Ask us how? Well, you'll find out. But hey, we've brought in Eckhart Tolle, we've brought in Dr. Wayne Dyer, Neale Donald Walsch, Dan Millman, some current leaders, right?
We've got Oprah, we've got the Dalai Lama. There's all kinds of different people in here. There's all kinds of wisdom that we've shared that we ran in because we went on a search to find out what are the wisdom keepers and the wisdom teachers saying about these times that we're living in now. It was a little bit of a treasure hunt. And so we share some of the things that we found, and then hopefully you'll follow up with some of those resources and find even more on your own. So we think that you'll really enjoy the show. It's packed with a lot of wisdom, and I'll send you on that little treasure hunt for yourself if you're looking to find balance and perspective in these very difficult, confusing times.
So tune in, and there's a call to action at the end of the show you're going to want to definitely pay attention to.
Oh, and at the very end, we tell you who's the greatest leader of all time.
Yeah, you don't want to miss that.
You don't want to miss that.
All right. Enjoy.
Enjoy.
Hello and welcome back to Chicks Talking Shift. I'm Angel Carlton.
And I'm Alicia Rice.
How's it going, girlfriend?
It's going good. I feel like I don't know. I think I'm feeling like I'm bobbing around in the void right now again. Once again, I feel like I've pushed away from the land, pushed away from the shore, don't have any land in sight, don't know where I'm going, how I'm getting there, what it's about. I'm just going with the flow and just trying to feel my way through it. Not always an easy place to be, but I've been here before, and I know the angst creates the circumstances and the conditions to help me move through whatever it is that I'm not sure about, and it'll bring growth. How about you?
Oh, same. Except for my life has been very full, so I've been distracted from it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm not as connected and tapped in spiritually and a higher consciousness. It takes a lot of effort these days to connect. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I hear you. It's not been an easy place to be. And I know there's energetically things happening as well. It's been a crazy roller coaster.
Yeah.
And it seems like, I know, having these conversations on how we can move through it has not been easy, even for you and I.
Yeah.
And we had a conversation recently. It's like, well, if we can help each other, who's out there that can help us? Right?
Right. That's exactly right.
Because we've been counting on each other since
Yeah.
since the beginning of all this.
Yeah.
And it's been magical. I have felt so light and enlightened at the end of these conversations when I have felt that I was in kind of a low or darker energy, and just having these conversations is what's lifted me up all this time. So now what? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, regardless of what's going on with you or not going on, you look adorable. I'm loving the hair. You got your hair cut. It looks a little bit lighter.
Yes. Well, all truth be told, from having COVID, I started shedding, which is a thing. It says like 20% of people who have COVID, it's one of those long hauler symptoms.
Mm.
And months later, you can start to lose your hair. And so my hair started just shedding. I mean, it was scary actually,
Yeah.
but it just changed texture. It was getting dry and brittle. And I just needed to cut it, clean it, get back to the healthy
Yes.
hair that I, hopefully am back at taking collagen powder and you name it. I'm doing all the right things, it
Yeah.
seems like,
Yeah.
to get my healthy hair back. But yeah, so I thought, hey, it's time for a change anyway. What the heck?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Thank you.
that's a lot of trauma that the body goes through, because you were sick for a while. It wasn't a quick, that was Delta. So you were sick for a lot longer than people are today with Omicron. That was a lot of trauma for your body to go through.
Oh God, yeah. Then I had the pneumonia. I felt jacked up. My nervous system was so jacked up. It was I felt like that's what COVID attacked, was my nervous system. And
Yes.
it's and so I can see how you lose your hair from your body thinking went through this massive trauma. And that's really common for people who've had heart attacks and strokes and other types of major trauma in their life. So that's really common. So yeah, COVID definitely can do that. And
Yeah.
not a lot of people know that. And then I started talking about it and everyone's like, oh my God, that explains why I was losing my hair.
Yes.
And I didn't know that. That was a COVID thing.
Yeah.
And absolutely it is.
Yeah. My uncle got it. He's in his 80s. He got it, but even in his 80s, he's got a full head of thick black hair, and his hair started falling out too.
Hmm.
He'd had it for a while because he was in the hospital, and it was Delta, and same thing. So it's a thing, definitely a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, you look cute.
Well, thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, Alicia, I know that we have been expressing some disappointment about the resources that, if you're on a spiritual path or if you're going through this awakening, which many of us are and have been, uh, where do we turn? We can't be the only ones frustrated about this. I mean, share your thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this was sparked from a conversation that we had recently, and we were musing about this exact thing. And we were talking about the people that had really grounded us during this time and had really been helpful to us. But yet, that was just a couple. And so we started talking about the disappointment that we've seen in leadership. And I'll just say leadership just kind of out in the 3D world, government leaders, medical leaders. I just, the leadership, it's just not been stellar at all. And so it started with the disappointment in that. But then all of a sudden, I started to think, where are the spiritual leaders?
That's not exactly how you framed it.
All right. Yeah, I got a little bit up in my energy,
You
I
got
will
a little-
admit. And so I think it basically went something like, where the fuck are the spiritual leaders right now? Where are the spiritual leaders? We are having a global catastrophe. All of mankind's going through it at the same time. Where have they been? Now, I think that they've definitely been out there kind of like, in their own boats doing their own thing. But what dawned on me is that I did not realize that I was craving guidance and something to ground me during these chaotic, divisive, difficult times. And I realized that I hadn't run across a lot of those kind of people with some good messages that maybe people were sharing around or anything like that. And I got really angry. I realized that what my soul wanted was to see a round table of discussion by some of the world's top religious and spiritual leaders to have a conversation about what this time in humanity's history and humanity's struggle means to us, and things that we can grab onto, kind of like life preservers, to help keep us a little bit more buoyant during all these waves that we have that are just crashing over us and confusing us and taking us under. And I ended up getting really angry. I know you remember that, because I went on a rant about it.
You did.
It was a terrible realization to me. All of a sudden, I found that I felt let down. It really, really bothered me.
To your point, in our conversation, we shared that we have been prepared by so many spiritual teachers. This first wave of incredible spiritual wisdom teachers that have paved the path and opened our minds to new thought. They really did help us prepare for this.
Yes.
They helped prepare us for what's coming. We weren't exactly going through it at the time. We were learning about it. We were fascinated by it. We were intrigued. We were like, oh, yes, definitely sign me up. This is exactly what we're here for. Well, now that we're in it, where are the resources, the tools? It's like, we know you talked about this happening, and here it is happening. So now what? So how do you walk us through it? Hold our hands as we're walking through this time.
Yeah. Well, what dawned on me when we were talking about that was, it took me all the way back to the beginning of the pandemic. I think it was probably March or April in 2020, when you had an event with a bunch of luminaries that you attended. And so remind me about what you found out when you participated in that event.
Well, it was Dr. Fab Mancini, who's a very well-known chiropractor and wellness expert. He hosted this event.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a lot of holistic people in the crowd. Ironically, nobody was wearing masks. It was just kind of a room where the pandemic didn't exist for a little while. It was really kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought in all these speakers. Some speakers came and spoke to us live. Others showed up virtually. Les Brown, Jack Canfield, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Brian Tracy, well-known motivational speakers of our time. It was a very intimate conversation we were having with them. What do we do? Like, how are you getting through this? How is this going to change us? Well, they all admitted that they were struggling too, that they were going through this too. Their whole world has been rocked. They were traveling the world, doing all these motivational, inspirational speaking. Now all of a sudden they're not. And they've had to kind of hit the pause button and look at their lives as well, just like everybody else. So when you and I went on this hunt for spiritual wisdom, speaking specifically to what we're dealing with now, post-pandemic, the division, the separation, all of the turmoil happening, like, we know this is part of the breaking down process for humanity, for our new systems to be put in place. We understand, we've been prepared for this. But on our quest, we were seeking those teachers just like everybody else. And right now, we've never been here as a humanity. We've never been here. So nobody has gone through this before. The intuitives knew about it. They understood it. They prepared us for it, told us about it. We innately felt the truth in it. It's happening. So now what? So you and I went on this hunt for some wisdom, and what some spiritual teachers, well-known experts in higher consciousness, TV personalities, what are they doing now? What are they saying? How are they guiding us? And you were in your rant saying, there are people that have had television shows and billions of dollars. What are they doing now to influence us, to help humanity? There's very little.
Well, let me just piggyback on that. And so I'll be really specific about what I ranted about. Oprah has been somebody that I have that I followed for decades. When she was on television, it was so interesting watching her personal evolution and her journey, and get people on her show to help bring wisdom and tools. These are some of the people that were preparing us, the Cheryl Richardsons of the world, and the Wayne Dyers, and Oprah, and Maya Angelou, and that sort of thing. And so that's kind of where a lot of my foundation ended up coming from. And that was where I guess I probably, and I don't mean to pick on Oprah, I think she's a wonderful woman. She does great things in the world. But when she's the one that stood out in my mind more than anything, because like you say, she had an amazingly long running, very popular television show. She has a magazine. She's got Soul Sunday now. You know, she's basically her own channel. She's got more money than God. She knows everybody in the world, all the top leaders and spiritual leaders. She's connected with them. I'm sure they're, you know, on speed dial in her phone, and she can reach out with just a phone call. And I realized I was disappointed, because Oprah has resources, but I realized what I would have loved, and what I'd still love, is to see Oprah gather a round table of some of our top spiritual leaders to say, now that the smoke's starting to clear and things will get less foggy, to have a nice roundtable conversation with some key wisdom keepers. That it reminds me of the old cartoons in the olden days, the Bugs Bunny and stuff. You know, something would happen, and all of a sudden somebody go blah, 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 and they'd have to clear their head.
Yeah.
You know, trying to shake out the cobwebs to think straight. And so that's kind of something that I would really like to see, is a sober, enlightening conversation with some of our top spiritual and religious leaders, to help us navigate with perspective where we've been, what just happened, where we're going, and most especially how we kind of ground ourselves and center ourselves and bring some balance to our lives after being through a very, very traumatic event, which isn't over, but it has traumatized the collective. I would love to see something like that. And she's got the money, she's got the resources, she's got the connections. I just would like to see them come together in more of a global mind than just whatever your little channel is, or your little pocket, or whoever follows you. She can get out there in a big way, because when she does something, the media pays attention to it.
Why couldn't she do something on primetime television?
Yes.
With all the spiritual teachers? Because, all right, 20 years ago, not everybody was open to what Oprah was introducing to the world, the Eckhart Tolles and the, you know, I mean, but people,
and some still aren't, and some still aren't, in all fairness.
But after what we've been through, there are a lot more people going, what is happening? And when you explain it from a higher consciousness perspective, and a truly transformation of the human species, the planetary transformation, all of that, I think people would be open to going, well, this actually makes sense.
Yeah.
It actually makes sense. And so why can we not bring that stuff to mainstream? Everybody's wondering, you know, we need some answers, because nothing makes sense right now. To your point, the leaders aren't really being leaders today. I mean, these are poor examples of leadership, the poorest example of leadership that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
These are not helping us. These are, from my perspective, and it's just my opinion, I feel the control, the manipulation to think this way, believe this way. I don't know who to trust. There's so much confusion in our lives, but at least open us up to some other perspectives so we can make sense of this.
Some universal perspectives, not in the trenches of this or that, or one side or the other, but universal, overarching universal ways to think of it from what we would call a 5D perspective, from a higher perspective. Not down in the gutter where we are most of the time anymore, just fighting and disagreeing, but really raising us up to a higher perspective. And this is how we might want to consider these things and hold on to this as your hope and be this to make a difference. All of those things. Because what you said is, who knows what the truth is? There's things that are true, but that doesn't mean that they're the truth. And that's also going to vary with each of us because all of our truth isn't the same. As much as we want to make it one thing that this is the truth, that does not hold true for everybody in humanity. And so finding that flexibility as well on how to consider some of the things that we're being told, some of the things that we're being asked to do and asked not to do, and just to shine some light on how we can be a little bit more buoyant and a little bit more stable during times of uncertainty,
Which is what we're going to do today.
Yeah.
We have taken it upon ourselves to dig deep, find some wisdom that could help us through this. And we wanted to share it with you so that you might have some tools from some of the teachers that we have followed that has helped us manage our energy through this process. And although it may or may not resonate with you, we're not feeling prepared for this like we had hoped. And we're hoping that the information and the wisdom that we'll share with you will help prepare you for what's to come and maybe give you a little bit more clarity on what it is we're all going through collectively.
Yeah.
And so we're going to share some wisdom from a lot of spiritual leaders, if you will. We can referring to them as spiritual wisdom teachers, whatever you want to call them. But at the end of this conversation, we will also share with you the one that we think is the one to follow, the best one of all. So you're going to want to stick around for that.
Yeah. And to preface it, just to piggyback on what you just said, what we say and who we talk about and the words that we use and the people that we discuss, it might not be for you. And so as always, take what resonates and leave the rest. If it doesn't resonate, that means it absolutely is not for you. Don't judge it. Just move on and go with what feels right to you. So always that caveat, because don't ever give up your power for somebody else. And just because somebody else said it doesn't mean that you have to own that and that has to be your truth or what's true for you.
Well said.
Yeah.
And so, Alicia, when you started digging, because we both kind of had our homework, right? You go see what you can find. I'll go see what I can find. What did you find?
Yeah.
And how did you do the research? You're a great researcher. So I always.
Well, I wasn't so great with this one. I got to tell you, sis, when I started Googling some of them, I just wasn't using the right keywords. I was trying unity and division and COVID and things related to that. And it just wasn't, I guess the things that I was running across felt really anemic to me. But you ended up putting in pandemic afterwards. And so that was one of the things that made a difference, to have some of this more current wisdom coming from over these last couple of years and some of the dynamics that we're dealing with here. Some of that started to bubble up a little bit more. But once you put in pandemic, that really, really made a difference and stuff started bubbling forth.
Well, it's been said that we have a broken humanity. Maybe not everybody feels like they're broken, but as a whole, we're being kind of knocked down, and then we're having to brush our knees off and get back up and keep going. And it's been an ongoing thing. And so we are in need of some healing.
Yes.
And so let's share some of those perspectives that can possibly heal some of the emotional wounds that we've experienced, and being kind of feeling bullied a little bit, the past couple of years.
Battered around back.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like, I just want my life back, or it's not going back. We've got to create a new one.
Yes.
So that's where we are. And that's what's so difficult, because it's almost like the ground has been shaken, and we're not on that stable ground that we once were. So we're stepping onto a platform that we've not been. So we're creating from a whole new canvas.
Yeah.
Let's kick it off. What we're sharing is the wisdom from some are ascended masters, some are spiritual teachers who have passed away, who were already foreshadowing the awakening that we're undergoing right now. We'll share a little bit from them and maybe even bring some unity, because like you said, Alicia, have that umbrella that we can all meet somewhere. We might not be able to meet here because our beliefs and our mindsets are a certain way here in the 3D world that we have to operate in every day. But if we just lift our perspective up a little bit higher, we can meet in that place.
Yeah.
And find that unity. Because I was asking myself, like, this is a major thing, global. 9/11, when those planes hit the World Trade Center, all of a sudden we knew that was going to change our world, changed our country. It pretty much changed a lot of things with the travel industry, which has a ripple effect globally. But there was a sense of unity after that took place.
Yeah.
People came together. We felt connected. We were all in this together, struggling together. I have not felt that with this pandemic.
Yeah.
I have felt, and I think it's the masks that have separated us. It's almost as if we're not in it together, and there's more division on the planet than ever before.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the stuff that I was looking for when I was searching was, how do we bring people back together and more unified? And so I wanted to focus on that, as well as the healing from disruption of the pandemic. Hi, I'm Angel with Chicks Talking Shift. I'm inviting you to be a part of our Vibe Tribe.
I'm Alicia with Chicks Talking Shift. If you like what you're hearing, please subscribe down below, hit that red button, and you'll get all of our videos as soon as they come out. And we love it if you would join us on Facebook at Chicks Talking Shift, or in our group, Chicks Talking Shift Vibe Tribe. And check us out on Instagram. We're over there too. So come join us. We're building a community.
Let's kick it off. Why don't you share about the ones that we've been following that have helped you and I?
Yeah. So one key one for me has been Lee Harris. And he's at leeharrisenergy.com. He's got a YouTube channel. He's got all kinds of free videos and a lot of different channeled messages. He every month, the first of every month, he does an energy update, which is kind of an intuitive update to what he's kind of feeling into, what the energies might be over the next month, and some of the themes that you might be working through there. He has been really solid during the pandemic. He really kind of upped the number of videos that he was doing during the pandemic. I think he really realized that people needed a lot of support. And so he was really, really present. I really appreciated having him there consistently throughout the pandemic. And he did a lot of, he's still doing them, very reasonably priced online seminars that have been, like online workshops and that sort of thing that really get you digging deep and answering the questions for yourself. He's given you the questions. He's given you some perspectives to kind of consider as you move through things, and questions that you can ask yourself to be able to figure out what's going on with you and how do you need to balance and move forward. So he has been a huge rock for both of us. And I have been deeply, deeply grateful and appreciative to him and his presence out there, which has been front and center for me all through the pandemic.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
And the fact that he channels the ascended group, whatever he calls the Z's, but they are in a more of a 12th dimension where they're bringing perspectives back to us, which, believe in that or not, the channeling, but it is so profound. It's guidance from a higher perspective, so that we can look at where we are and see things that we can't see right now. So he's pointing things out to us that just are beyond what we can see and understand. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah, it's a higher and a wider lens. And for people that might be a little bit concerned or contrary with the concept of channeling, one of the things that I would say is judge the message, not the messenger or how it came. If the words resonate, then take the wisdom from the words. It doesn't matter where it came from. Don't put up that that filter and that blockage of worrying about, oh, well, I don't believe in channel messages. You don't need to, one way or the other. Just listen to the words and see where they have resonance. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, excellent
Yeah.
advice for
Yeah.
all of us.
And so
You know,
share our other favorite one that we've spent a lot of time with during this time.
I know you and I have been a huge fan of Jim Self, masteringalchemy.com.
Yeah.
He has seemed to be always under the radar, not a well-known guy or spiritual leader,
Yeah.
but wow, the teachings that come from his work. And I believe he's another channeler. He's tapped into a higher source that brings these profound messages that absolutely resonated with me on a deep level. We attended the 10-10-10 back 11 years ago. That retreat that literally changed my life, and having that experience that he takes us through in almost every call that we have. I get to escape the physical body and really see a perspective from my soul's perspective. It's been pretty amazing. And he has started through the pandemic the park bench project for people like us. We know we're here for now, but for this time, rather, we signed up. Yeah, we want to be there. But now what do we do? So he's helping us navigate through these energies in the process and giving us some incredible tools to help us balance all the energies. He's always offering free seminars and webinars, and they're it's just great energy work. Phenomenal. If you are being called as a light worker, it'll help you balance the energy so that you can do your work. And he says to play. And
he says to play, and that's exactly, no pressure. We're just playing. Playing. I think the thing that I like about Jim Self so much is it's always a meditation, right? And, just kind of a guided talk. He's a bit more in the symbolism and building energetic structures and energetic scaffolding to help stabilize you and give you a place to consider things from and really decide what you need to do for yourself. It's not about anybody else. It's all about you. And that's primarily where he comes from, is kind of refining ourselves from the inside out. And so I really like that energetic scaffolding that he provides us with in those meditations. Jim Self's been talking about the shift for a very long time. And he's got that free ebook that you can download called The Shift. So that's one of the things that you can get at masteringalchemy.com as well, to be able to figure out how to better navigate this, some of the changes that we're going through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I moved to Florida, I brought like 5 or 6 books with me. The rest were in storage.
Right.
That little book. And it's a little booklet that that one made the cut. Because it's so powerful.
It is.
And we're going through it right now. We are literally going through what that book is about. Extremely helpful resource. Yeah. I have to say, Matt Kahn also has been someone that I've been following. He's been putting out a lot of videos. Even though dynamic of his videos have changed, I really loved his live gatherings when he put out YouTube videos from his live gatherings. Just had a different vibe, but his messages for me have been really powerful. He's written a book called Whatever Arises. Love that. It's mattkahn.org.
Yeah, mattkahn.org.
Yeah, he's charming. He's an intuitive. Also, just sharing messages that we all can use and benefit from right now.
Of love and unity. Yeah.
Yes. And I am a fan of Deepak Chopra. I remember meeting him through Neale.
Yes.
And great man. You can feel his peacefulness. He's just a very calm, peaceful being. Just loved his energy. And he's a very chill guy, So Deepak, I know, has been doing a lot of interviews. He's actually been on television. He's been doing television interviews and talking about, he's just had a lot of media appearances. He has an app the Chopra app, which I've downloaded. There's a lot of free meditations on there. Those are really, really, really powerful and a great practice. And he's really been doing a lot of talk about mental health during the pandemic. And it's all of his talks have a spiritual flair or undertone to them. But it's all connected, the mind, body, spirit connection. And so I was really pleased to find how much Deepak has been out there during this time as one of our spiritual leaders.
And he's at chopra.com, right? CHOPRA.com. He's been one that I've followed for decades. And so he's also been one of those ones that has shared perspectives and tools to help me both navigate myself, to self-excavate and figure out what's important to me and where I'm headed, as well as give me a larger picture of what's going on. Health, a whole lot of things that he's done. He's written a lot of books about health, the mind-body connection. He's been a big one for me. Another one that's been a big, and I mentioned her earlier, Oprah, at Oprah.com. I think she's done a variety of television appearances where people have interviewed her about what's going on in the pandemic. But one of the things that I know that she did is she really tried to break it down more on a personal level. Like I said, she's got more money than God, uber wealthy. And so one of the things that she started doing when the need started arising, lockdown put a lot of people in need. She started giving to her close circles first, the people that she knew personally that needed assistance. And then over time, she's put in like $12 million into some of the communities that she's lived in. So she's really kind of taken a personal path with it of more quietly trying to make a difference where she can. And money isn't always key, but in a lot of situations, a lot of people need resources, whether it's money or just the resources that money buys. So she's done a whole lot during the pandemic to try to make a difference on a real individual, private, and community level. So I really like seeing that. I thought that was really cool.
Well, yeah, she's always been so generous.
Yes.
And then the flip side of that, there's also the spiritual teachers that are doing paid events, paid virtual events, conferences, retreats, those things that you still have to pay for. And hey, we understand everybody has to make a living. This is how you make a living. There's no judgment around it, but there are some incredible leaders out there like Greg Braden, who I'm a huge fan of. I've read his books and speaks about transformation, and it's more quantum physics stuff. And it's Greg, GREGG, BRADEN.com. And he is offering the Pure Human series. And those are paid events, but he's speaking to humanity in the state of humanity right now and where we're heading. And so that's somebody to follow.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of specific wisdom as well that we thought we would share. And somebody who brought us together. Yeah. We'll start with him.
Neale Donald Walsch. Yeah. And so I found a quote from Neale that I thought was nice. He said, because, and this was dealing with kind of the division that we're in, which that's really been a bothersome thing for me, somebody that's a little bit more sensitive emotionally and empathic. The division has really kind of grated on me a bit. I'm just like, can't we all just get along? Something that Neale said is, he says, our differences don't have to create divisions, and our contrast don't have to create conflicts. And the variations in our beliefs don't have to create violence in our lives. There's another way, but we won't find that way by searching for it. We'll only find it by creating it.
Yes.
And it puts the onus on us, doesn't it?
Well, mine is not a better way. Mine is merely another way.
Another way.
The famous quote from Conversations with God books. There's so many of them. That book series changed my life as well.
Me too.
That's a good one. That's excellent.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
Yeah. And so you have one from one of the most famous masters of all time. You want to tell us a little bit about what he had to say?
Yes, because of course, I mean, I have thought many times, whether you're a Christian or not, whatever, despite your belief system, I do believe this individual walked on planet Earth at one time and exemplified the ultimate human being and some of the gifts that we all have. This individual was a role model for us. And I always thought, if Jesus were to show up today, what would he say? WWJD, right? I asked, what would Jesus say, at least about the division that's taking place? Because that's really one of the most heartbreaking things to me. I mean, the pandemic, of course, but what I did find in Matthew 12:25, it reads, "Every kingdom divided against itself will be ruined. And every city or household divided against itself will not stand." And so the advice that Jesus gives us and what he would say to his followers, to believe in certain ways that would prevent the division and possibly even heal the division. Things like love others, including your enemies. How many enemies have we created on social media because they believe another way? Yeah. Love them, like what Matt Kahn says, whatever arises, love that. Don't judge others, don't condemn others, forgive others, treat others the same way you'd like to be treated. These are just, how long have we heard these things? Yes. Pray for those that persecute you, do good to those who hate you, bless those that curse you. These are foundational biblical teachings of just being a good human. Be merciful, be humble, serve each other, do more for others than what they ask of you. If someone has done something that upsets you or offends you, go and talk to them about it. It's just being kind and being a good human and rising above whatever it is. It's taken that higher road that we talk about a little bit on, in previous shows, and it's just being the observer and then responding with love and kindness. It's not easy. It's not easy sometimes when somebody has you fired up and you've got an emotional trigger inside of us, which we all can be easily triggered these days. That's what Jesus would do.
The thing that's fascinating to me about that is we all know these things. And so why don't we live by them more? It's like you say, it's not easy. Loving your neighbor is fine when your neighbor's not in your face and they're staying on their side of the fence. But what about when they're not acting right, or even when they do you wrong, or when you don't agree with them? Why can we not seem to stop and raise us up to that higher 5D level and say, how do I be above this? How can I create something better out of this instead of making it worse? And so that's one of the things that really dawned on me. I know these things. I was raised with these things. Yeah. But why do we forget? Is it because it's too hard? Because that's one of the things that I hear a lot. Oh, well, that's great, but it's really hard. Yeah, it's really hard. Nobody said it's easy. It's really easy to love somebody when they're loving to you and they're kind.
I think that forgiveness is forgiving. You're giving when you can find the place where you can forgive yourself. I have to forgive that person. No, actually, I've had to forgive myself many, many times. Mm-hmm. And almost every time that I felt like I had to forgive somebody else, I had to forgive myself first. I had to give to myself first.
And that's often the most difficult.
It is.
As riled up as we get about other people, we get so used to the beat up stick that we have for ourselves. It makes it difficult for us to take ourselves off the hook. And a lot of times we'll do it a lot easier for other people.
Yeah, because we're all suffering.
Oh, well,
And so brings us to our next person.
yeah. Buddha. What's the phrase that I've said it before? It's like the pain is inevitable, but the suffering's optional. And the suffering's based upon perspective. It's how we choose to view things that we're seeing and that we're going through. And so I would just like to encourage people to Google Buddha and the Four Noble Truths. And that's kind of a little bit of a framework about suffering. It explains what suffering is, the cause of it, how to end it, and kind of how to take the path out of it. So that's a real good resource to start to get a little bit perspective about why we may not be feeling so good inside and how to get rid of some of that rub that we have.
Yes, there's a lot of wisdom when you can find the enlightenment in the suffering. And we know that we've talked about it a million times. And when change happens, that is the beginning of the transformation process.
Yeah.
And so in the suffering of loss or whatever catastrophe that's happening in your life, and collectively we're all going through some form of suffering, but that's essentially what Buddha is saying. And that's beautiful. Great resource. Another one that was one of my foundational spiritual teachers decades ago was Dr. Wayne Dyer, who
Oh,
has since passed away. Oh, he
yeah.
is so missed. But I'm wondering, what would he say? What would he be talking about right now? I did find a quote that resonated with me. Like if he were to speak to me today, here's what he would say: progress is impossible without change. And those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything.
Mm.
And so, right now, as we're all going through this massive change, this massive transformation, it has to start with our own minds in accepting the change, being aware of the change. We can't really go through a transformation process in a healthy way unless we're first aware of it. And that starts with our minds.
Mhm.
And so that really resonated with me. He's notoriously known for The Power of Intention. I mean, that book was one of my first spiritual books that I read.
Great series of videos too on the power of intention.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, drwaynedyer.com. Got to go there, check out
Yeah.
his videos and resources. They are still applicable to what we're going through. He talks a lot about soul purpose. I know when I was trying to find my soul purpose back when, a lot of his guidance helped me, and just a lot of foundational spiritual principles and some great resources on transformation and the awakening that he spoke about decades ago.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
You were saying what he was talking about. Those that can't change their minds can't change anything. And you mentioned acceptance. And I think some people, when they hear the word acceptance, they think that it's resignation, that you just absolutely resign yourself to whatever that is and you just give up. That's not what it is at all. Oh, it's understanding. It's kind of the serenity prayer, right? Having the courage to change the things you can and the wisdom to know the difference. There's a lot of things happening that we don't have any control of. And so that's kind of what acceptance is just knowing I've got no control of that. Doesn't mean you don't still try to have your voice heard if that's something that is changing and you don't like the direction that it's going in. It doesn't mean that you give up any of that. It just means that you accept the fact that, yeah, this is what's going on, which helps kind of calm a little bit of that inner resistance and that friction that we feel. And then keep moving forward with whatever actions and words and whatever you need to do to be able to try to guide whatever that process is. But you just don't stay balled up in anger because it's not going in the direction that you want it to go. So that was one of the things that dawned on me when you said that. Acceptance is a really big deal.
Yeah, great little pearl wisdom there. Thank you.
Yeah. Another one that we've just lost recently, Thich Nhat Hanh. His website is plumvillage.org. And he's just such a wise, grounded soul. One of the things that I ran into was that somebody asked him the question, How do you keep yourself from losing faith in humanity and giving up altogether when there's so much violence and so much division and so much madness in the world? And so what he said was, there's a practice called taking refuge in Buddhism. You want to feel safe and protected, and you want to feel calm. But if you don't learn how to take refuge, you'll lose your peace, you'll lose your feeling of safety and your calm. You'll suffer, and you'll cause other people to suffer. And he said that each of us has the seed of Buddhahood, the capacity of being calm, being understanding, being compassionate, taking refuge in that island of safety within us. He said, this is how we can maintain our humanness, our peace, and our hope. This practice is so important. He gives a practice that is just a little bit of an idea about how you do what he's suggesting. And he said, if you practice like this from the inside, you basically become an island of peace and of compassion, and you might even inspire other people to do the same. And the analogy that he gives, it's like a boat filled with people crossing the ocean. If they encounter a storm and everybody panics, the boat will capsize. But if there's one person in that boat who can remain calm, that person can inspire other people to be calm. And then there can be hope for the whole boatload of people. And he says, and he asks, who is that person who can stay calm in the situation of distress? He says, in Buddhism, that's you. You have to be that person. And if you do, then you'll be the savior of all of us. He says it's a very strong practice. So I could feel the peace and the calm in that. And I could feel that he was kind of returning me to myself and helping me to understand that it didn't matter what was going on out there, that the responsibility lied on me to create my own peace. And then hopefully, if I was able to create my own peace and my own balance, that other people would notice and that it would be infectious.
Yes.
And would help other people be the same and inspire them in that way. So I really liked the energy of that little teaching and that perspective. I could just really feel myself calming inside.
So powerful.
It was very
That was a
empowering.
really powerful one. Very
Yeah.
helpful too,
Yeah.
because in the middle of chaos, we can so easily just become chaotic. And it's the self-awareness when you realize I can be calm right now and be the calm one. It's a choice. That's a powerful practice. When they say, if you can meditate on a mountaintop, in nature, I mean, that's the one thing. I mean, who can't at least attempt meditation?
Right.
But to meditate on a busy corner of New York City, can you do that? And that's Buddhism, the calmness, and especially how you were reading it. I was like, oh yeah, bring it, Alicia, bring it. Yeah, feeling all calm. Speaking of peace, that's good.
Yes.
Another one of my favorites is The Peaceful Warrior.
Yeah.
Dan Millman. One of his books that did make the trip to Florida, one of the few, The Life You Were Born to Live. Okay, he won't admit that it's numerology, but it's numerology. It's okay. We don't have to put a label on it, but he breaks down our birthday, soul purpose. It's been a Bible to me in figuring out myself and my relationships, that helping other people understand who they are. It's powerful. But so I'm like, Dan Millman has to have something out there right now. Like he's just so wise and highly intuitive, gifted individual. And I did read an interview with Jason Hartman that he had, and they were talking about loneliness. during this time. And
Yeah.
I thought, wow, what a key piece of information that we're really not acknowledging, the loneliness. And he asks, what does that mean? We call it solitude, we call it peace and quiet. So he says, so I think that the plus side of this idea we call loneliness is that it's going to help us appreciate the joy of being with other people and crowds. So they're not taking that for granted. We're not taking that connection for granted anymore. So there is a very positive flip side to all this isolation and the mask and the separation of us being, in solitude. And so he said, yes, it's too bad people are feeling lonely, but they are also appreciating a connection with other people. And that is what's going to get us back into that higher state of consciousness when we are reconnected. And many of us are reconnecting. I'm feeling it because, well, I live in Florida. I can get out and connect with people on a regular basis. And there are still people wearing masks here, but not as much. And I'm feeling that connection is starting to happen. We're coming out of the darkness and really appreciating. And I'm seeing so much kindness and people being courteous and cordial. And maybe it's just the sunshine and palm trees and people are just happy to be here. But there is such a pleasant energy that I'm embracing and I'm seeing and I'm noticing. Yeah. Dan Millman, thepeacefulwarrior.com. Good stuff. And it's a great little movie too.
It is a
About
great
his
little
story.
movie. I love Dan Millman. So one of my very favorites is the Dalai Lama. I saw him several years ago at a university in Iowa and got 2 rows back, center, just such a good view of him and so many good teachings. I was raised Christian. I'm more Buddhist than I am Christian. There's just something about it that deeply resonates with me. He said, "Is the way to change others' minds is with affection, not anger." What that reminds me of is kill them with kindness, right?
Yes.
If you come up against them in anger, it's only going to stir their anger more. Replace that anger with some affection and with some compassion and with some soft eyes and a soft tongue and soft ears to kind of take the edge off of that potential anger and conflict. And what he says is, remember that sometimes not getting what you want is a wonderful stroke of luck. He says that an open heart is an open mind. That's a good one. And one of the things that he said when I went to see him was that the education of the brain is really important, but we also need to be educating the hearts of our young people, because the heart is where true unity is birthed. That was a very, very powerful teaching. You and I have had this conversation in some of our podcasts about the importance of emotional intelligence. And so that's where the compassion comes from, right? He's written, his last book was called An Appeal to the World, The Way to Peace in a Time of Division. And so that's kind of got my interest
Yes.
because, like I said, it's one of the things that's been rubbing on me is the division. So I'd be real curious to dig into that and see what he has to say about how to navigate it and how to consider it when, you're in the midst of your own chaos and uncertainty. So he's always a go-to for me. And his website's just dalailama.com, DALAILAMA.com. There's some good resources there that you might want to check out.
Oh, good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Compassion. Because everybody's going through something right now. And if you could just step up a little higher in your awareness than that person and just have a little bit of compassion as to why they're flipping out,
Yeah.
that we are all just on the edge and a breaking point. You know how I feel about the children, and bringing more soft skills into the education system, I have always thought needed to be there, and empowering our children to tap into being more of a leader in their own right, helping them understand their gifts. What is character? What is integrity? What is honesty? Why are these things important? What is courage in a fear-based world that they're stepping into, wearing masks and distrusting, society, and having all of these, coming out with speech impediments, and all these studies are showing all the negative effects of what the children are going through right now, that I think as conscious adults, it's our responsibility to help open the hearts of these young people, however, whenever we can, when we see one, every opportunity we get, because I do believe they're hungry for it. They're not getting it.
Well said. Good words there, Angel. Good concepts for sure.
A futurist. This woman was known as a futurist back in the 80s, talking about what we are experiencing today, the Great Awakening, the transformation. The late Barbara Marx Hubbard, incredible soul that walked this planet, incredible. Here's a quote from Barbara that if she was sitting on this podcast with us, oh my God, could you imagine?
Oh, that would be awesome.
This is, I know, right?
Go, Barbara. Go, Barbara.
Go, Barbara. We love you. All right. Anyway.
But we digress.
Yes, we did. Here's what she would say to us and to all of you. It has become obvious that a rising mass of humanity is undergoing a profound inner mutation of transformation. Evolutionary ideas are not only serving to make sense of this change, but also acting to catalyze the potential within us to transform. Thought creates specifically. So I love that. Yeah. Thought, you got to be very specific. She continues to say, it is the planetary crisis into which we were born that is awakening our sleeping potential for transformation. Don't you feel like this is what's happening right now?
Absolutely.
Whew. Yeah. Planet Earth has given birth to a species capable of choosing whether to consciously evolve ourselves and our social forms, or to continue the course we have set toward our own extinction. We now know that evolution happens by choice, not chance. Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It's almost like she said that yesterday.
Yes.
If she was in that round table that you're talking about, Oprah moderating, Barbara, that's exactly what she would share with us, right?
Yeah.
It's our choice. We chose to be here. That's how we're creating, through our thinking. That's how we're creating the next evolution.
What I like about that is she starts from that kind of big universal umbrella, right, of transformation and kind of that thing. But then she brings it right back down to the individual. It happens by choice, not chance. And it's the choices that each of us make as individuals that's going to determine how this ship is steered that we're on. And I know that oftentimes it feels like they, whoever the ones in power and all that are, and the ones that have money, it feels like they're the ones that doing it. But we've got more power than we realize. Mm-hmm. And it starts with us. It starts managing our inner worlds first, so we're not triggered easily, and we're treating and responding with compassion and with empathy, and we're seeking to create unity and that higher path, that higher road as often as possible. But choice by choice, we end up basically voting for what we're in alignment with. Going back, to what we were saying earlier about Thich Nhat Hanh, that was saying in the boat, it's about inspiring others with just your way of being. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I really like that high. She had it way up here in the universal level and kind of evolutionary transformation, but then she brings it down to choice, the choice of an individual.
Yeah, it's so true. I had an encounter at the dry cleaners recently, and it just triggered me. As much as I was trying not to be irked by it, I was just like, I am going to write a Google review and I am going to let the world know that they should not go to this dry cleaners. And it is just not a good place. Brad was the island of calm for me. And who would that Google review be for, really? Who would that be benefiting, really? And I'm like, well, the general public needs to know. Do they? Do they really need to know about your experience? And he did help me see the higher perspective. I mean, immediately. And I'm like, I know all this, but just let me be, upset about it. And I was. And I'm like, he's right. I mean, gosh, he's so right. And he was calm, but he was like, because he knows that's not who I am.
Yes.
So he was very, just holding the mirror up at the same time. I did speak with the owner of the dry cleaners the next day, and they did all the right things. And it was just beautiful. I met a new friend. I mean, it was just, turned out really nicely. Instead of reacting in anger, it just worked out because of that higher consciousness. But he did play that role, that choice. And I had a choice to fight with him about it or just admit he is right. He's absolutely right. Everything he's saying right now. So anyway, just a real life example of what you're saying.
Yeah. Well,
So,
first I'm going to say that guy's a keeper right there. You need to hang
yeah.
on to that one. He obviously bled off some of your steam, but I don't think there's a problem with feeling the anger. It's just what the response is, right? And that's what he was trying to guide there, was not necessarily bad that you feel disappointment or anger or whatever that, but how are you going to respond with that? And what's going to be the result of you making that choice? Everyone should have a mate like that to help talk them down and raise them up and say, okay, what's your ultimate goal here? And at least bleed off some of that, because you could still write a review that said what happened if you chose to share it, but your lens that you share it through is probably going to change a little bit. It's not going to be quite as spiky and as angry, and just more factual. And hey, this is what you might want to consider if you're thinking about taking something to this place that's sentimental or valuable to you. Because I read reviews on everything, and I go straight for the negative ones, because I know the positive ones, a lot of them are paid for and they're friends. And I know if I'm already considering that, then the positive isn't necessarily going to sell me because I'm already there looking at it. But it's the negative that ends up showing me what I might be in for that I might not see through all the shiny.
Oh, yeah. I so easily saw how somebody can become a Karen in a split second. Or, and I hate that term. I just hate it. But the videos are out there, and there's so many of them, and they're getting millions and millions of views. But it's just something snaps and there's nobody to ground us, and we get triggered and we cannot get a hold of our emotions. So to surround yourself around people who can be the calm in your life, so that when you are feeling that way, you've got somebody to call. That's the person you need to have on speed dial.
Yeah.
Talk you off the edge.
Yeah.
So and we don't need any more Karens in this world.
Just to kind of continue the Karen thing, I also hate that term because I know some fabulous people named Karen, and it's just,
I know,
it just makes me kind of sad. But the truth is, I know a real life Karen, and she's one of the most famous ones. When you know the story of who she is, how she is, and what happened, it really helps bring some more compassion to what seems crazy initially. I didn't know it for the longest time. And then she told me, interestingly enough, I'm like, I didn't have any idea. And she told me her story is very, very interesting. I'd love to see if at some point we could get her on the show, because I've got so much compassion for people and their breaking points. Sometimes it's people, and I don't know that this is the case for her at all, but sometimes it's just a matter of people not being able to get their medications during a pandemic, things that help stabilize them, and they just go off the rails. And other times it's all the confusion and the anger that you have inside and not knowing what to do with it, and then things not seeming fair, and it just sets you off the rails. So yeah, that's a whole nother topic. That the whole Karen thing is really fascinating for me. And I feel for the way some people's lives have been ruined by circumstances that have reasons for the way that they were.
Yeah.
So,
Good
yeah.
point. Glad you brought that up.
Another one that I've followed for a long time. Now, the truth is, I haven't paid a whole lot of attention to what he's done recently, but because he was such a important part of my life at one point, I wanted to go see what Gary Zhukov had to say about it. He wrote, I think one of his most famous books is The Seat of the Soul. And so his website is seatofthesoul.com. And so one of the things that I found was he has something called the miracle of the coronavirus, and it's a series. He says that creating authentic power requires distinguishing love from fear in yourself and choosing love no matter what's happening inside you or what's happening outside. And so that's been kind of a thing that we've talked about off and on during the pandemic, is the difference between love and fear, that everything, all emotion boils down to one of those two fundamental emotions, feelings, thoughts. But he continues and he says, our evolution now requires us to create authentic power. The coronavirus is teaching us how to do that. The reality of the coronavirus is often lost in the fear of it, including denial. Yet it's a deadly threat. This reality demands that we bring our fears into our awareness so that we can choose responsibly between our fears on the one hand and love on the other. This is important because not only your health depends upon your choices, but also the health of others. I just liked it because he really kind of shines a light on that love and that fear, and the fact that the coronavirus has thrust most of us into some kind of fear, whether it's of the virus and whatever our beliefs are about the virus and all that. I don't care one way or the other. You have your beliefs, I have mine. But the fact that we need to make choices at any particular time in the way that we're acting or the way that we're responding is it coming from love or fear? And if love and unity is one of the key things that we're interested in, then we're going to try to take the path of love and unity as often as we possibly can. And when we don't stand in that compassionate place, don't judge ourselves, but think, I could have probably done better than that, and just use it as fuel for making a better decision next time. And this is how we refine ourselves slowly but surely.
Yes, absolutely. I think love is the theme here. I really do. I think love heals everything. Ken Wilber, which is somebody I studied years ago, and he's the integral life guru, just very well known in that integral space. He said the only way we can evolve in the face of greater complexity is through greater inclusivity, which is love itself. Inclusivity, including, inclusive, that's love. If that doesn't speak to our times, on all levels, including the coronavirus, the racism, political divisiveness, it's inclusivity. We've gotten away from it. Here's something I pulled from his website, which is integrallife.com. And Ken Wilber is just a master teacher. His books are deep. It's the kind of book you have to read a paragraph over and over and over just to comprehend it and have it sink in. It is such forward thinking concepts, but fascinating. And so he says, one of the extraordinary qualities of integral consciousness is the ability to simultaneously challenge yourself to be something greater than who you are, while loving yourself exactly as you are. It's like a little inner conflict happening at all times, right?
Yes.
He said, if we can muster the strength and compassion to be both completely honest with ourselves and kind to ourselves, not only can we overcome the many obstacles that we inevitably face throughout our journey, but these obstacles can be seen for what they actually are. Stepping stones that can take us from our potential to our purpose, from our brokenness to our wholeness, from our fragile humanity to our unbreakable divinity. Oh, like unbreakable divinity. That is what we are and who we are. In case we forgot, people, that's all this is a stepping stone. That's what the pandemic is. These are stepping stones to us realizing our divine nature again. And that's where we're all connected. That's where we are all one. And I don't know who it is that's trying to separate us. They're doing a pretty good job because we're falling for it.
Yeah, with our
But we don't have
permission.
to.
Yeah,
We have a
with our
choice
permission.
until now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, until
Not
now.
without our permission. That's right.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good one. I love that stepping stone analogy. The obstacles are stepping stones. Yeah, and some obstacles, they're painful. They are really, really painful and really difficult. For some people that are going through a really tough time, it might feel like that's a little bit mild. Oh, it's a stepping stone. That sounds so delightful.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah. But nevertheless, and generally we learn the most through our struggles, unfortunately. We have a tendency to learn a lot more through difficulty than we do when things are just humming along fine because we're too busy having a good time and, just enjoying life. Yeah,
True.
that was a really, really good one. I've had exposure to Ken Wilber, not a whole lot, but that makes me want to look at him a little bit more deeper, especially when you say that his books are, you really need to go over some paragraphs a couple of different times to really take in all the fullness of what's there. So
Oh yeah, that's right up your alley.
it is right up my alley.
Yes, and I know the one you're about to share is that level of intelligence, and so you'll appreciate it for sure.
One of my personal favorite go-tos during the pandemic, especially early on in that first year of 2020, I stumbled across a YouTube channel called Rebel Wisdom. And I started looking through the channel and ran across a whole lot of videos there that I really appreciated. It is a channel that's kind of a blend of conscious intellectualism and spirituality. And their goal is to help us ignite, inspire, and transform the world from the inside out. I would say if you find yourself a bit confused and stranded, but especially between the us and them themes, which is a difficult place to be, especially if you're not landing very well in one side or the other. They've got all these sense-making videos and resources and even courses that you can take to help us make sense of what's going on and help us to carve out a more center kind of path or a niche between the us and them so that we can create some kind of dialogue around the changes that we're experiencing, because that's one of the most tragic things to me is the fact that the division is one thing, but we've gotten to the point to where we can't talk about things through the center. If you try to take a center path, both sides get mad at you. And we've got such hair triggers and we're so sensitive and our topics are so emotional and we're in so much fear, which is what's generating that emotion, combined with the fact that we've got puppeteers that are creating the division between us, that I found them as a really good resource. Like I say, they've got a lot of intellectuals on there. So for some people, that's going to be their thing. Other people, it's not. But it's a consciousness that they have, and they are spiritual people. They talk a lot about meditation, first principles, that sort of thing. So you might want to check out Rebel Wisdom on YouTube. They also have a website called it's rebelwisdom.co.uk because they're in Britain. And the guy that started it used to work for the BBC. And then he kind of branched off and started doing his own. So that's been a resource for me that has been very affirming to me because I'm much more of a middle path girl. And it's just where I naturally lie. It's not something that I try real hard to do. It's always who I've been. And I was real comforted by them during that time because I've said time and time again, I feel like I'm out in left field or I'm watching a tennis match and I'm not cheering for either team because I kind of like both of them. And so they were kind of balm for my soul when I was like, what's going on? And I'm not fitting anywhere. So I just wanted to say that's one of the resources that I used a lot and I still go to. So I highly recommend them.
And I have tuned in since you shared that with me.
Mhm.
And what I love about them is they are addressing all the current affairs. They're talking about the vaccines. They're talking about, I mean, they are talking about it, but from a higher consciousness place, which
Yeah.
so many of us are afraid to do
Yeah.
because we're afraid of being judged or canceled, or and they're just like you said it so eloquently about how they approach the perspectives that they're sharing, and it's good. It's very current.
Yeah. Very good.
I really like what they're doing, and
Yeah.
it's intellectual. It
It
is.
is. And
Yeah.
what I appreciate about it is that I'm a landscape girl, right? I don't care where you sit in the landscape, where you stand in the trenches, none of that makes any, you're allowed to have whatever, but they paint the landscape
Yeah.
and they travel that spectrum and kind of address everything. So yeah, I'm glad that you've enjoyed them because they've
Mhm.
got some really good stuff. And thank you for saying that. Very current stuff. As
Mhm.
things were going on, they were talking about it and
Yeah.
helping kind of parse it out and just dialoguing around it, which having a discussion, that's one of the things that's been so hard to find.
Yeah. A lot of truth
A lot of
being
truth.
shared,
Yeah.
and something we're not seeing in mainstream. So
Yeah.
that's a great resource right now. Going back to one of the original spiritual teachers, I mentioned him earlier,
Yeah.
and the world got introduced to this guy on Oprah years and years ago, Eckhart Tolle. He's still very active, doing his work, does a lot of virtual things, still making videos, who still appears to be very enlightened and has stayed on that path. And I came across something that he shared recently about what we're going through, and it's a little bit long, but I couldn't figure out a place to chisel it down because it was all so good.
Yeah.
I know reading it again is going to reinforce the message, but it's good. And here's what Eckhart Tolle.com. If you want to look up Eckhart, it's ECKHARTTOLLE.com, EckhartTolle.com. And his famous book was The Power of Now, and staying in that present moment, in the power of being present. And that was just a foundational spiritual principle. And we talk about it all the time.
Yes, we do.
And so if we can just all practice that one thing that he is so well known for, hey, we've got this then. But here's what he has to say about what we're going through right now as we get to the tail end of this conversation. He said, so use this precious time that is here because it is part of the awakening consciousness of humanity. It seems almost paradoxical to say that something that on the surface looks very negative and looks like an obstacle to the well-being of humanity. And yes, it's an obstacle to the well-being of humanity on a purely physical level, perhaps temporarily, yes. But something that looks like an obstacle from a conventional point of view is actually opportunity for you to awaken to a deeper, or you could say, higher level of consciousness. Humans don't awaken when they're in their comfort zone. They awaken when they are taken out of their comfort zone. We've all been taken out of our comfort zone.
Mm.
Not everybody does. It's an opportunity. If you do not awaken when you're no longer in your comfort zone, you suffer. You're unhappy. You're anxious. You are fearful. You haven't found the rock. A few little things that are helpful. Be aware of your breathing. I love some of the things that he's sharing. Now he's getting some tools, hey, you're having a tough time. This is how we do it. Right?
Yes.
Be aware of your breathing. I mean, that immediately takes you into the present moment. If you only think about your inhale and exhale, you can't think about anything else. That is such a simple yet highly valuable tool. He says, be aware of the energy field in your body. You talk about this all the time. How does that feel in your body? Is it anxious? Be aware of it. Become that observer, because the body is alive. this energy, this life energy that pervades the body, you feel that. You're breathing. You feel the aliveness in the body. You're aware of sense perceptions. We're always talking about sensing our way through this transformation, this shift. You look around, you're present, and then the yin, you become aware of that presence that is inseparable from who you are, that presence that is inseparable from who you are. That's an amazing realization. There's more to you than the person. That presence is deeper than the person. You needed the adversity either to find it or to deepen that, which you had already found it, but it was not yet a deep realization.
Tell it, Eckhart. Oh my gosh, that was
Ooh.
good.
For us to get back to being present, we had to get out of our comfort zones.
Yes.
We have been thrown out of our comfort zone. Like, oh yeah, by the way, we're all going to be homebound and quarantined. And nobody's ever really talked about how that's impacting our psyches and our mental health. And we know it is, but to go back to our breath and feel that presence, which is beyond our physical being. It's powerful, powerful stuff.
That was very, very good. I like it. And it's so interesting because in all the podcasts we've done, you can see the influence of all these different authors and masters in the things that we've said. If you visit their stuff, this is where our foundation came from.
That's right.
You know, they're the OGs. Yeah. Well, speaking of OGs, that brings me to the final thing, which this has been, I can't tell you how many times I've posted on social media during the pandemic. It's always been a favorite of mine. And it really brings me to realize what's important. This was something that was written by the elders of the Hopi Nation on June 8th, 2000. One of my all-time favorites. We have been telling people that this is the 11th hour. Now you must go back and tell people that this is the hour. And there are many things to be considered. Where are you living? What are you doing? What are your relationships? Are you in right relation? Where's your water? Know your garden. It's time to speak your truth. Create your community. Be good to each other. And do not look outside yourself for the leader. This could be a good time. There is a river flowing now very fast. It is so great and swift that there are those who will be afraid. They will try to hold on to the shore. They will feel they're being torn apart and they will suffer greatly. Know the river has its destination. The elders say we must let go of the shore and push off into the river. Keep our eyes open and our heads above water. See who's in there with you and celebrate. At this time in history, we are to take nothing personally, least of all ourselves. For the moment we do, our spiritual growth and journey comes to a halt. The time of the lone wolf is over. Gather yourselves. Banish the word struggle from your attitude and your vocabulary. All that you do now must be done in a sacred manner and in celebration. We are the ones we've been waiting for.
Drop the mic.
This was written 22 years ago. 22 years ago it was written, and it could have been written today. The piece that really always goes through me, that I always think about, is there's a river flowing now very fast. It's so great and swift that there are those who will be afraid. Totally what's going on. They will try to hold on to the shore. I see that as our attachments, right? They will feel they're being torn apart and they will suffer greatly. Being attached and holding on and not releasing is what beats us up. And they say, the elders say, we must let go of the shore and push off into the river. See who is there with you and celebrate, because those people have had the same mindset that you have, and that's how you all ended up there. That absolutely fascinates me.
It's like building the bridge. It's the same concept that we have talked about in that podcast.
Yeah. Bridge this shift. That was that. Yeah.
This shift. Yes.
Yeah.
It's build the bridge. Get on the bridge and start building it.
Yeah.
There are others on there building it with you.
Yeah.
You are not alone. You are not alone in this. It feels like it sometimes. And you and I have felt isolated, even from each other sometimes, not connected. Like we were there in the beginning of our conversations.
Yeah.
We started having them in 2020. It was just easier to connect. And so we have felt a separation and through all this, but wow.
Yeah.
That was powerful.
Yeah. And so it always, it just reminds me, don't hold on to it, Alicia. You're holding on to the shore. Let go, push off. Don't be attached. And that has just been that's been a North Star for me through this whole thing.
Yeah, we can't be attached anymore. I mean, because it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
We're trying to hang on to something that no longer is part of our reality.
Well said.
It's just, we're grasping onto something that's just not there anymore. And so we are in a place, there's a theme here that we have the choice to start creating, to start thinking differently. And you just read it. We are the ones we're waiting for. And that, bringing it full circle, we said we're going to have a favorite to share with you at the end of this conversation. And although that really was my favorite, our favorite spiritual leader and wisdom keeper, hands down, is you. It's ourselves. It's staying calm in the chaos. It's being that leader, that role model for others, and tapping into that, having just a little bit of courage to step into that power and potential that we all need right now, but we have it. It is time for us to plug in and power up and nurture that part of ourselves and not be afraid. And let's flow in the river together and become that for others. If you've got just a little bit of courage, a little bit of strength to do that, we encourage you to, that now is your time. Yeah. It is our time. And although we looked for the wisdom from these spiritual gurus and well-known authors that have written books and channeled things and just have been really popular with their messages. And it's been a great guide and resource for us. We're all experiencing something now where we're creating our own wisdom to share. And so that does make us the wisdom keepers, the wisdom teachers of our time. Share share your wisdom. And if you have a favorite teacher that we didn't mention, go to our Facebook page, Chicks Talking Shift, and share it there. We think it's time for humanity to have some spiritual resources, somewhere where they can go, where we all can go and hear some positive messages on how to get through this shift and some tools and resources. So we hope that this conversation has been valuable to you.
Yeah.
What closing thoughts do you have, Alicia?
Well, oh gosh, I don't know. That was just everything you just said was so beautiful and so inspiring. And I would love people to visit either Chicks Talking Shift on Facebook or the Chicks Talking Shift Vibe Tribe. I would love to see some of your favorite wisdom posted there that people run across when they go to Google their leaders, or the people that they really appreciate, that teach them a whole lot, as well as anything that anybody said that we've mentioned. I think that would be a fabulous way to continue the conversation and spread the wisdom, because the more wisdom that gets shared and the more perspective, the more of us that are going to calm down, we're going to get centered, and we're going to be walking in a better way through all of this. And that's what we're hoping that Chicks Talking Shift Vibe Tribe does. Is it's a gathering place where we can share some wisdom and we can talk about what it is that we're going through to really kind of stabilize ourselves a little bit. So,
and we're always talking about generating self-awareness, more self-awareness. And I think that's the gist of this conversation too,
yeah.
is make a pledge to become more self-aware for yourself. I think it begins with just paying attention to your own self, your own behaviors, your own feelings, your own thoughts. And then you'll be able to influence others once you can see how you're responding to things. And so what can we affirm as influencers and wisdom keepers to say, create a pledge of self-awareness. I think if we're going to do that, Alicia, what are some things to become aware of? I am aware of my struggle, and I honor my struggle and the suffering that I've been through, not only mine, but that of others, and how we have moved through it, because it does breed wisdom. What else would you affirm?
I am aware of the division that's within myself and my divisive nature, because I talk about the wolves fighting inside, right? So I know that I'm divided within myself at different times. And so trying my best to be aware of that and to curb that so that I don't act or respond in a way that stirs other people up.
So important. I like that.
Yeah.
I pledge to be aware of how and what I speak and how I relate to others. I know that the thoughts that I have are very, very powerful, but when I put it into the vibration of my voice and I put it out there in such a way that it manifests. And so we are manifesting very quickly these days. Become aware of the words that I speak.
Yes.
And how I relate to others and speak about others.
Yes. And I pledge to become aware of my judgments, my biases, and my false opinions. And it goes back to things that we learned earlier from the wisdom keepers, that transformation can't come about unless we're willing to change our minds. And so that means letting in other viewpoints and other resources and pieces of information. Doesn't mean you have to swallow it whole and make it your own. Again, take what resonates and leave the rest. And get exposure to other ways of thinking and other ways of doing and believing, because when we do, it gives us something else to consider. And so slowly but surely we find ourselves evolving higher and higher into higher ways of thinking and being and doing. And part of that is removing those blockages of judgment and ego and bias and being so threatened that someone else might have a different opinion. Just realize that when you're in that space that you feel threatened, is it love or is it fear? Chances are you're in fear and you're afraid of what they're saying, that if it became a reality, that wouldn't be what you wanted to do or how you wanted to live. Own that, know that, and that gives you something to work with. Okay, this is fear, and I understand what that is. And then at least recognizing it helps kind of tamp it down a little bit to where you're not so reactive. So that's a really big one for me, and that I've just trying to keep practicing and practicing and practicing, because there's a lot of triggers out there, and I see a lot of things that I want to jump on, and I really have to stop and I have to self-examine. Why do you have that energy inside? Because it's not about them. It's about me and something that I'm afraid of.
Wow. Whew. That's so important right now. That would solve all the world's problems right there.
Yeah.
If we all could affirm and stick to
Yeah.
that in
Yeah.
itself. And so for me, my pledge of self-awareness, I affirm to be more aware of being transparent in a sense, with holding myself accountable for my actions, for my behaviors, having the responsibility to be a living example for others. I raised my son for him to realize that even as a 5 or 6 year old, that the 4 year old next door is looking to him on how 5 and 6 year olds
Yeah.
6 year olds act. And so he always knew that somebody was always watching, and he was a living example for those that were younger than him. And he was always kind to the children younger than him. He was teaching them. He took that very seriously, that he was teaching them how to be a 5 or 6 year old.
Yes,
But
that's an
that's kind of,
excellent teaching.
we are a new humanity, and we're there. Those of us that are aware, have some level of self-awareness, can step into being a role model, even if it's in a very small circle of influence that you share. And I affirm to be that, and surround myself around people that will hold me accountable to be that as well, like Brad did for me the other day. Admit the mistakes that I've made, and really just be super transparent in knowing my downfalls. And that's part of the human experience. I am not perfect, and I strive to be the best that I can be always. But in this climate today, it's not easy to be our best selves. I go out, I speak to crowds, and when I share my message of resilience and tap into that best version of yourself, I preach it. But I also understand it's not an easy thing for us to accomplish. And so we're hoping that these conversations and the tools that we bring to you help you, as they do help us as well.
Yes.
So
yeah, being human is a messy business.
Yeah.
Especially in the midst of what we're going through. And so finally, last but not least, I pledge to be kind to myself and to others as often as I possibly can. Point myself in that direction, even when they're irritating or they're wrong or whatever. Just try my best. But the biggest challenge there, truthfully, isn't about being kind to other people. Sometimes the biggest challenge is being kind to myself and cutting myself the same slack that I do for others. And so paying attention to what's going in the mind. How am I self-talking? Because there's times that I find I catch myself talking to myself. I would never talk like that to somebody else.
Wow.
And I have to back myself consciously out of it. So yeah, kindness and compassion. If we did those things, my gosh, think about how everything would change. Things would change overnight.
Yeah, I have to believe it's starting to change Now, is it at a tipping point? Not even close.
Yeah.
But I know there's a lot of good people out there that are making a pledge similar to this within, who want to see a different world than what we've been exposed to as of late. So, hey, if you're one of those, we want we want to know you.
Yeah.
So please come visit us at
Yeah.
the Chicks Talking Shift Vibe Tribe and vibe with us.
Right.
All
Yeah.
right. Well,
Excellent.
you have a closing thought you want to share, because
I
this has
do
been
have a
phenomenal.
closing
I feel lighter, inspired.
You too.
I was feeling a little heavy when we started the
Me too.
conversation, but now, wow, it's amazing what a little inspiration and wisdom can do. Good
Yes.
stuff.
And so where the conversation started was me and my little rant of where the fuck are the spiritual leaders? Where are the leaders, period? Right. That's how it started. And so I ran into this, and it was a combination of a lot of different things that we talked about. And so this is from Ralph Lewis, and he teaches a lot about inner leadership. And he says inner leadership is about being true to yourself and doing what you need to do because it's right for you. It doesn't matter to the inner leader whether they have followers or not. Their own inner vision is what counts for them. It's about honoring and respecting yourself without the arrogance of certainty. And if the inner leader truly honors and values him or herself, then they will honor and value others as well. It's kind of like live and let live, right?
Love
Be
it.
self-aware,
Be your
live and
leader.
let live. Yeah.
It's not about the followers, because we don't have any. So
Now, would you go ahead and tell them that for? Being transparent.
It's a growing community.
It is a
That's all
growing
we're saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm just kidding. The point is, that's what we've been doing, is focusing on just being that inner leader. And that's what these conversations have done for me, is just to keep me grounded in realizing that I can practice. It's a practice being my best self.
Yeah.
And so thank you for holding me accountable and being the amazing friend that you've been over the years.
Yes. Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
nice back and forth. Yeah. It's like sharpening knives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I appreciate it. Yeah. Deep
Same.
gratitude to you. Absolutely.
Namaste.
Yes. Namaste.
All right. And namaste to all of you. Thank you for joining our conversation today. And we'll see you next time on Chicks Talking Shift. Bye.
Lead from the inside.
Yeah.